Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another ZFA Conversation. My name is Ben Meshech. I am the Director of Public Affairs at the ZFA, and this evening it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Erel Margalit. Before I do so, however, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I speak, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Knowing that this conversation is being watched in every Australian state, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands on which people are watching this. Dr. Margalit is one of the chief architects of Israel's startup nation identity. For 3 decades, he has been a visionary leader, championing innovation as a tool for economic growth and an engine for social change. Erel is the founder and executive chairman of Jerusalem Venture Partners, or JVB, which is one of the world's top performing funds. Under Erel's leadership, JVP raised over $1.5 billion. His stewardship had Forbes call him the leading non-American venture capitalist and a man that combines social profit with smart investment. Erel and his wife, Debbie, also established a social impact program to help Israel's disadvantaged kids. This has raised academic achievements and promoted personal and societal growth for tens of thousands of Jews and Arab kids right across the country. Speaking with Erel this evening is Dr. Adir Shiffman. Adir is the Commerce Chair of the ZFA board. He has established and sold numerous startup tech companies here in Australia and is now Executive Chair of Catapult Sports and Sleeping Duck. He also has a weekly column in the Australian Financial Review. Without doubt, Adir and Erel will have a lot in common and have a lot to talk about. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Adir.
Thank you, Bren. Hi, Erel. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here this evening.
I mean, you are one of the most accomplished and influential and interesting people to come out of Israel, full stop. And I think we're going to have a fantastic conversation. And there are so many places that we could start, but I'm going to start in an unusual place, which is to take you back to when you were, I think, 8 years old, and you went with your parents and moved to the US and moved to Detroit. And as part of living in Detroit, you started playing some basketball for the local team there. Is that right? And you had some talent playing basketball, and it was noticed. And when you came back to Israel a couple of years later, you kept playing basketball. And give us a feel for, you know, how good your talents were. I mean, do you think that you would have been a Division I or Division II college basketball type standard? Is that where it was heading?
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Adir, and it's wonderful to be here. I was born in a kibbutz Na'an. Now, the kibbutz, not only did it invent the sprinklers, you remember? We invented it, but also we had the best team, one of the best teams in the country for basketball. And actually, we beat Maccabi Tel Aviv, which is the European champion, and was a very good Israeli team at the time. It was a Friday night, and we beat Maccabi Tel Aviv by 10 points in our own kibbutz, and that gave many of us, and you know, as a kid, I played basketball in the kibbutz, and it gave us a lot of hope, and it was like a David and Goliath standing, and we felt like everything was possible. When I came to the US, what happened was that people don't really talk to you if your English is not with the right accent. So that's why you needed to adopt an accent. And my name is Erel, and my surname is Margalit, which means a pearl. So at the time, there was a great American player that was called Earl the Pearl. And so they called me the White Earl the Pearl. And I was a point guard and learned how to dribble, still in the kibbutz, but I was very fortunate to be one of the main players on the Detroit kids team, and that gave me access into the social acceptance. It's either through sports or something else, but you got to be cool somehow.
And so, I mean, that is a dream story for Australians, because the Australian dream for most kids, like Americans, is to excel at sport and then to go on and have a professional career if possible, which is very unusual. And yet you had kind of this dream offer that came your way, which was to play for the Israeli youth team. And tell us how you responded to that offer.
No, so we came back to Israel. My father created the first community center in a Galilee city called Carmiel. And my mother was the first, was educating there in one of the first schools. And then, so I played on the North Kids team, and it was very good. And then coming to Jerusalem, I was elected to be on the youth Israeli team in the beginning for the South. And then they unified all the different divisions. And then what happened was that you needed to make a decision, because either you went to a combat unit in the army, or you went to be a basketball player. They offered both options. And at a certain moment, I decided that I want to volunteer, and I volunteered at the time for Special Forces, and become. I had dreams about how to be a special soldier as well, and so I had to put aside my goal to become a basketball star in Israel. And but it's okay. It gave me a lot of strength during my youth. And I think that anybody who understands a team game understands a lot about what's going on later on in business and social aspects.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
it makes you stronger.
That's a remarkable decision. I mean, you have this opportunity, and you're speaking here to a few hundred Zionists living in Australia. It's a very Zionist community, and you have almost the ultimate Zionist story. Except the longer we talk, the more Zionist it's going to get. And you're what the Americans would call a patriot, right? Which is you can go and you can play basketball for the national team, but there's something there's more Zionist to do, and that is to go into one of the special units of an infantry of Golani and do your service. You've got a very interesting upbringing. Your parents were both special people. Before we talk about you, tell us a little bit about them and what they did and how much of that shaped your decision, I guess, at that moment and your Zionism.
Yeah, so, my father, my mother were educator, community people. The community centers nonprofit organization was something big that was created in Israel in the 70s. And my father was one of the first managers in one of these community centers. Today, it's in every city, in almost every major neighborhood in the country. And my mother was a great teacher. There's still students who follow her from the kibbutz. They're now 70-something, and I still, you're the son of Mickey, the famous teacher that allowed me to realize my strength in this or in that. And so I think that, growing up in a house where you are an educator, you are, sometimes it's not so easy to be the son of the teacher because you are not the most obedient student in the next class. And so they throw you out of class, and you put your mother to shame, but you try to behave.
We've both been down that road.
Yes. The fact that I had basketball always saved me. So the school always wanted point guard for the school. So anyway, I think it affected my life in a way that I see them as social entrepreneurs. And I know that I'm a business entrepreneur as well as a social activist, but entrepreneurs are people who see reality, imagine how it could change, and think they can cause the reality to change. It doesn't matter if it's an artist or an educational personality or a startup entrepreneur. So I think that's the main idea, and so they definitely affected my life and shaped it, and I'm very proud of them. Wish they were alive to see so many good things that are happening, but they're with me in spirit in a big way.
And, I think that the reason I call you a Zionist is you have this career where obviously you've been tremendously successful in the business world and in technology. And we'll talk about that. It's a remarkable story in itself. But I think the broader story is that you've had this journey where at each step, the city of Jerusalem and the country of Israel and probably the region has progressed as a result of your activities. And it seems to have been a very deliberate ethos that you have. And I wonder, you were a Ben Meshech from Kibbutz Na'an, and kibbutzim are not the hot things they once were back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Do you think that being a Ben Meshech gives you that particular perspective, or makes you more Zionist, makes you want to go into these kind of infantry units, etc.? And do you think that, did that shape you at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think, growing up in a kibbutz, in an environment which on one hand is very supportive, on the other hand is very challenging. Not sleeping at home with your parents is a big deal. I have a lot of criticism on that. So I think the kibbutz.
So you were you lived in a children's house as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
old school kibbutz.
Old school, yes. And then, but then going out there to the world, understanding that there's a different language as a kid coming to the U.S. and understanding the world. You come from a kibbutz, but you understand the world through TV, through commercials, through music, through different things that shape your thoughts and identities, through sports, right? So it's something that I think has been. So I think it's the can-do approach, which is probably something I got very early on in the kibbutz, or together with my friends, and kept with me throughout my life, and had some criticism about the kibbutz, but also am very proud to have been a part of it as well.
Not about the sprinklers. I was born on Kibbutz Israel, as it happens, and I left when I was 1. And people on the right, they tell me that that kibbutz ethos is what put me on leftist views, and the people on the left criticize me for being too far right. So I think I'm a centrist, but definitely I think once that's in your blood and you're around it, I think it absolutely shapes your views. But you came back to Jerusalem, is that right? When you moved back, you kind of moved around, but you ended up in Jerusalem, and it seems like you developed a very soft spot for Jerusalem. What triggered that? Because that's a big part of your story. At what point did you start developing this very soft spot for Jerusalem and this connection to the city?
So first of all, my great-great-grandfather on 2 sides, they came to Jerusalem in 1860. It's a Sephardic family. It's called Tajer and Abulafia in Ishaya. They came here, and they were from Bulgaria, and they were very active here, and a lot of what they did, it stayed with us. They were also some of the first families that established Tel Aviv in 1909, but Jerusalem is part of our heritage and our blood. And then, my father, when I was a kid, and he was studying, he was in the army, but then he was studying in the Hebrew University, and I came to visit him. And I remember I always looked at that city on the mountain as something that was very magical. And, I love the spirit of the city. I love the fact that it's a dramatic city. Sometimes this drama works for conflict, but I think that the drama could work for power. The fact that you have an old city and new media, the fact that you have Arabs and Jews, secular, religious. You have people that are coming from a different background here. And to me, I love it. I love the dynamics. I love the debates. I love the creativity that you do together. Today, we have a lot of ultra-Orthodox women and men. We have people from the Arab community. For us, innovation in a city like Jerusalem is the ability to bring a new story to a city that has so many old stories that you need a new one. And connecting people through education, through entrepreneurship, is something that speaks to me, to my daughters, to my wife, and to people here in the JVP compound in a big way.
Absolutely. I want to talk about, your first step was, all of the steps have been remarkable in terms of your contribution to the city, but your first step, was also incredible. And so I'll talk about that. And then I know you've got some photos there, and it would be great for you to talk us through some of those photos, which I think people will love. But the thing that you do is you go and join the Jerusalem Development Authority, and you work with Teddy Cohen, and you have this dramatic influence on the development of the city. I mean, you've got to tell us what it was like to work with Teddy. Everyone knows Teddy. What it was like to be building the city at that time, which I think was in 1990 approximately. I mean, I spent the year in Jerusalem in 1994, which was pretty much around the time of the stadium at Stadion Teddy, I think, and Kenyon Malcha had just kind of come there. I mean, it was an amazing time in Jerusalem. What was it like to be in that office at that time, and what was it like to work with Teddy?
So Teddy Cohen is a legend, right? So he's, you see me here working in my daytimer, and Teddy Cohen in the big,
I reckon if we oh, okay, you want to
that's the kibbutz, right?
Yeah,
that's the army, right?
Yeah.
That's special forces of Golani, and it's a place where we learn what friendship. That's Moshe's. That's how I made my living when I got accepted to Columbia without a scholarship, and every semester there costs a lot of money. That's Teddy Cohen when we had Mario Cuomo come and visit us in Jerusalem. And you know, when I went and studied, and actually my thesis, in philosophy of all things, was the entrepreneurs of history.
Yes,
and that is how political leaders can learn from business leaders and reinvent the story of their city, their country, and so on. And so one of the biggest stories that I liked was the story of the Silicon Valley and Route 128 in Boston. And I came with that idea back to Jerusalem, thinking that wherever you have very educated people and a great university and a bunch of passionate scientific people, you can create a startup scene. And I went to Teddy Cohen, and in the beginning, he didn't know what I want from him because he was great with donations. High tech was not one of the things that he was doing, but he understood it. And, you know, he treated me when I just walked in with a lot of doubt. Teddy Cohen could be a very generous, but also a very short-tempered man. And so he said, Jerusalem is a city of lazy people. Why do you think that we could create something like that here? People here like to pray and study. They don't like to work. And I told him, yes, but when they study, it could be a big thing. And I gave him, at the time they were building the university for the Mormons, and you could see it out of his window at his office. And I told him, spontaneous, I said, look at the Mormons, Salt Lake City. They are also people who pray and study. In the beginning of the 80s, they created a development authority, and now they're the fastest growing region in the US for software and biotech. What they did, we should do. And he liked the fact that I answered with an example so much. He said, okay, so let's go and see it. Let's go there. And so very quickly, we went to Salt Lake City. And he gave me a chance to build the biggest incentive package in the country at that point. And we built Haifa, which is a place where we sold a lot of lots to Intel, to Digital, to IBM, to many of the international companies, and also built the first technology park. This is Mario Cuomo, as he was in Jerusalem. And we together with Teddy, because Teddy was such a big name, everybody wanted to meet him. And this is Paris, and you see Paris, Teddy, and Herzog, the father, where we created the first major international conference. We called it the Israel Business Conference, and it had all the major people from around the world. And it was the first time that conferences like that were done. And we actually had Yitzhak Rabin as the new prime minister. And he got up on stage and he spoke to my generation. He said, this is your time. We are changing the region. We need technology. We need cooperation with Jordan, with Egypt. It is time for your generation to step forward and I heard the message loud and clear. And when Teddy wasn't elected a little bit later, I went out to set JVP, Jerusalem Venture Partners. And it was more luck than capability, but we got
we'll refute that argument shortly. But you know, who knew the Mormons had such a wonderful responsibility for some of your early career trajectory? I mean, I bet you that's a fact that hasn't come out in any TED talk or interview previously. Salt Lake City is pretty amazing. I mean, I think that Qualtrics might have emanated from Salt Lake City. It's not exactly the party town of the US, but, you know, I think that observation that you made about Salt Lake City was very prescient and very insightful. And, you know, being in that room with the three of them, I mean, Peres, Herzog, Cuomo, discussing these things, being spoken to by Rabin, I mean, that must have been very inspirational for you in terms of, you know, the career trajectory and the passion that you felt about possibility, maybe is how I'll describe it.
You know, it's underestimated how much political leaders with business leaders could create a public-private initiative that will spark the imagination of so many people. And I think that the successful initiatives in Israel throughout the 70 years have been projects like that. I mean, there's a bunch of things that Israel still doesn't do well, like housing and different things. But in technology, we've established the biggest public-private partnership initiatives. And I think that being able to enjoy some of the best minds and people from around the world has been remarkable. And then bringing some of them here and convincing them that the same spirit that we had in the kibbutz, the spirit of a pioneer, could be now a modern pioneer. Pioneer is a word. It's an old word for entrepreneur. You know, somebody who creates something in the new frontier, something that you know so well in Australia, you know, just giving that kind of passion and that kind of drive. And I think that in the last few years, we've been missing some of that. The public-private partnership initiatives to create the next big thing in Israel is something that we should get back to center stage.
And when you were in that room with those, you know, titans of politics, let's call them, you chose not to go down the political route at that point in your life. You went to the private part of public-private. Was that a tough decision at that point, or was that obvious to you that you wanted to go first into the private sector?
I felt I wanted to achieve something, to do something. I felt that technology is one of the new languages of the world that I need to understand better and help demonstrate what I was preaching, which is we can create some of the next generation biggest companies in Israel, not just develop the next microprocessor for Intel or the VAX 4000 for digital or the new software system for Microsoft, but also develop some of the next generation products. But Israelis at that time needed two things. One is a little bit of money, and it was called venture capital. We didn't know how to call it in Israel. We call it hon sikun, risk capital. Yeah. That's why in the first 15 years, I didn't have any Israeli investors.
It's not a great sales pitch, really. I mean, that is a marketing disaster, that term.
Exactly. And also someone to talk to. You know, when entrepreneurs are coming up with an idea, they need a sounding board. They need some people to talk to, and that's what we were all about. And you know, in the first instance of what we were doing.
And so you leave. I think I read that in 1994 you started JVP. And so tell me what it was like. How did you raise your first fund? You know, leaving JDA, starting JVP, you have to raise a fund. How did you get the money? How big was that first fund?
Yeah, right. So I actually left in June 1993, and it took me 7-8 months to raise the first fund, which closed, a $20 million fund, which closed in January 1994. This is the first office. And you had two files, right? You had one filing system that was potential investments and another filing system which was potential investors. And you needed to get to the first investors to make the investments. And that, so, we had, we came from humble beginnings. My wife was an artist and, so telling her we're not going to make any salary for the next 8 months. I didn't know how much time it was going to take. I thought it was going to take shorter. And now I understand that raising your first fund in 8 months is actually not a long time. Then I thought it was eternity because we had no salary. But I got very lucky and I met a few very generous individuals that basically wanted me to stop nagging them and gave me like $250,000 and go do something. And so leave me alone. And then
that's a real startup journey, right? It's the hustle of raising private capital. And I mean, 9 months is astonishingly short for a first fund in 1993. How much venture capital was there in Israel? Who were the big players and how big were they at that time? Was Benchmark there already or that's much later?
No, it's much later. There was no VC. There was only one fund that was created at the time, Gemini, which was Advent, which raised money a few months before us. There was Discount Investments, part of Discount Bank that had some investments, but no, there wasn't VC here. So
this is amazing the reason I'm emphasizing this is, we know that you're one of the people instrumental in Startup Nation. The whole world knows Startup Nation now. Everyone takes for granted that Israel has the highest per capita venture capital availability on earth. But 1993, I mean, there's basically no one. There's you with 9 months and a tin shaking and getting $250,000 here and there to put together $20 million, which is quite a remarkable story. How long did it take you to deploy the money?
Yeah, so we made the investments. We made 13 investments. You want to put the slide on some of the investments? So, and actually, we got very lucky. We invested in 13 companies. 4 of them were written off, did not succeed. 2 of them were sold to large companies. And 7 of them went public on NASDAQ. This was the first time that we got a chance to go to NASDAQ, and I got to know that process. And I was very lucky to be able to take so many companies to NASDAQ. And so some of these companies became very large. Some of them were in the communication area where Israel took defense technologies and civilianized it. We had, you want to put the Netro? Civilianized it. So we had a company called Netro, which was the first microwave radio to transmit the last mile of video to the homes. Became a $5.5 billion company. Today we have the billions. Then it was out of this world.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's 1999, right? I mean,
yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then 1999, it's like 4 or 5 years after we started the fund. And then and the second fund was even better because we had Chromatis for 4.8 billion, but then we had some larger funds. So the second fund was 70, first fund 20 million, 75, 160, 400, and then it continued and over the years. And we got very lucky with many of these companies, and we're fortunate enough to create some of Israel's largest companies over the years.
But that's a nice curve. That's the curve you want from the businesses that you're investing in, basically. But, you're doing this from Jerusalem. I mean, did people take you seriously operating a tech VC out of Jerusalem? How did you shape that attitude?
Yeah, no, Jerusalem was not in the game. Jerusalem was a holy city where you had clashes between Arabs and Jews. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember. Jerusalem was a city that had the second Intifada. It was very challenged and not easy at all. But it's we succeeded with companies after companies, and were able to create a little kibbutz here, right? So we're at the old train station. Oh. I'm just trying to show you some additional pictures.
Okay. I can see that's a 1992 photo, that photo.
Yes.
1992. There's a lot of hunger on that face in June 1992, I have to tell you. You can kind of feel it.
And so we created in the old train station one of the greatest places for innovation in the city, with startups, with live music, with an environment which was also safe from a security standpoint, but also a creative hub, much more than just business. And that's where we created the social projects as well. These were the projects that, which really unify different parts of the city. And for us, innovation, there's about 20,000 jobs in technology that were created. Jerusalem has some of the biggest exits mobilized from Jerusalem. The Hebrew University came into play and a variety of additional projects. And it became one of the fastest growing places. And we were very fortunate, and many of these companies began to scale and succeed and do better, and some of them didn't, some of them did, but there were enough good companies that scaled, and the city was on the map. Of course, we were not only in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
We went also to Be'er Sheva in the south, to the Galilee in food tech, and to a variety of different cities around Israel in a way that is making it very interesting, allowing different parts of the communities to join.
And so I'm very keen to, talk about the way that you've used innovation and entrepreneurship and tech as a form of social progress and coexistence, and certainly, your 7-city plan when you were in Knesset. But before we go on to that, I thought you might want to briefly tell a story. You can pick whichever company you want, but I thought CyberArk is maybe one of the most interesting stories I've seen, just because of where it came from and your opportunity to exit and doubling down. And, I think for people, the journey of investing in a business that's kind of special in the way it gets going, and then having the courage of your convictions, that might be an interesting story for people.
Yeah, so CyberArk, before cybersecurity was such a hot space. One second, we're trying to show you some additional pictures. Could you אני צריך אולי תעלי פה את הפרזנטציה. שמה, של השבעה הזמן? אבל יש לי פה. בואי נעלה את אחד. לא מותקן, שנייה אני... לא משנה. Could you... בואי. כן. Could you allow us to share, because we want to show you a few more photos?
Sorry, it's Brent here. Yeah, I'm not too sure what's happening. You've got access to share. Try again, and let's see if it works.
If it doesn't work, we can keep talking, and you can just, depending on how big it is, you can send it through to Bren, and he'll share it from his machine as well. I think the photos are really fantastic. We should try and see them there.
You see that? Do you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can. Okay,
great, thank you. So this is the hub in Jerusalem. This is that's the hub in New York, where we have a lot of activity. But what I want to show you, this is how it looked like, the hub in Jerusalem. Yeah. In the second Intifada, this is the city was down and out, and we came in and we built it into one of the fastest growing places in the city. And today it's next to the German colony, overlooking the old city, the old train station. There's live music here. Some of Israel's best chefs have restaurants here. And there's the biggest social project in the country that's managed from here. I mean, the second phase was Be'er Sheva, where we created the cyber city of the South. And that would give you you asked about CyberArk. CyberArk is a cyber security company which did not succeed so well after 10 years. And then many people wanted to sell it. for 120 million. I just think we have a 1 second. I'll show you CyberArk in a second. There it is. And so what happened there was that we got an offer to sell the company. We did not want to sell the company. 5 of the entrepreneurs came from underprivileged neighborhoods in Jerusalem. So they said, Erel, well, you have the stamina to go on, but we don't have, we need a house, we need a car, we need to pay for the education of our kids. So we offered them to buy 1/3 of their position at the price that the company got an offer at 120 million. We went to 47%. Goldman Sachs, we brought them in with 23%. And eventually the company now is worth 6 billion. And so instead of selling for 120, you continue to build one of the fastest growing cybersecurity companies in the country. And the 47% in a $6 billion company gives you a lot more than in $120 million. And you can understand why sometimes staying with your winners, even if you don't get it immediately right, can lead to very big results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely one of the key themes that I saw that, was part of your political career and really predates that is the idea that tech can have a dramatic impact. And the way I saw you describe it is, it's not just about dividing the available pie in a different way. It's about growing the size of the pie that Israel excels at. What did you see in those founders from that underprivileged background? How did, a lot of people probably wouldn't have invested in guys that came from that place. Like, what did you see in them that made you want to invest?
I thought they were the smartest technologists in terms of protecting the organization from within. The company did okay, but it's only until, you remember Checkpoint had a wonderful product called Firewall. And when you said firewall, everybody had an image in their head, like the Chinese wall protecting from the invasion from the Mongolians, but virtually, right? So everybody thought they understood what cybersecurity was because of the word firewall. And CyberArk, it was a different kind of cybersecurity. It was like the CIA. It was like the enemy from within. It was like agents that intercept agents. At the time, there was a great film with Angelina Jolie called Salt. She was an agent that was intercepting rogue agents that were infiltrating into the White House. And so that idea of a new cybersecurity gestalt, which assumes that people are already penetrating into your organization, but can catch them when they try to make a bad move, was the new gestalt that CyberArk was producing. And it had a big marketing message after years where we didn't get the marketing message across. That's why I believe that this could become a very large company.
I mean, that's remarkable.
And we took some of these ideas to the city in the south, to Beersheba. And Beersheba today is the fastest growing city in cybersecurity. With, at the time you see the photo on the left, there was a desert and a university and a city that was not very successful. And today it's the fastest growing city in cyber AI. And the Army is actually moving some of its Army bases there as well.
And so let's segue through to that. I mean, the last thing I'll say specifically about venture capital is just to disavow anyone who's watching that, there was too much of a luck component. I mean, there's been this level of consistent success, but also, you were the highest ranked non-American, I think, on that Midas list, which is, that is the definitive list of venture capital and other investors. So, that's an enormous achievement. But, for you, I think the interesting thing is it doesn't seem to be all about the money. Certainly your time, it seems to be about building businesses and innovation and making a positive difference on a city, a country, and a region. And so before we get on to that, I'm going to ask you a question that's been asked by someone who's watching. And I encourage people to ask questions. Just put them in the Q&A box and I'll endeavor to ask them, which is, it's all fantastic that you've had this success, pardon me, and there's startup founders that have made a ton of money, et cetera. But there is an argument that says that high-tech success is highly concentrated in populations, including in the Israeli population. You know, this person watching mentioned 8%. I don't know about the number, but do you think that that's true? I mean, what's your response to that?
I think he's right. I think that part of the goal of people like ourselves, Silicon Valley or Israel or wherever innovation is breaking, you know, the glass and the ceiling, the glass ceiling of our country. You're absolutely right. But here, look at this example of the photo that I'm showing you. This is a new center. We took the ugliest building in Kiryat Shmona, which is on the border of Lebanon, and brought together the city of Kiryat Shmona, which is probably the poorest city in Israel from an economic standpoint, with the kibbutzim around it, 22 kibbutzim, the moshavim, the Druze villages, the Arab villages. And today we're creating the biggest food tech hub that Israel has ever known, with agriculture, food, technology in the Galilee. And so the individual that asked you this question is absolutely right. And so what is our goal? What is our goal? Our goal is to take technology for transformational changes in society as well. Now, how could that be? It could be when you come up with a theme that the Galilee can own that you're not doing currently in Tel Aviv. But what we're saying, don't come with a small idea out of pity for the Galilee. Come up with the next big idea for the country that the Galilee would lead, because it makes sense to lead this from the Galilee, which has the highest mountains and the lowest valleys and some of the best agricultural arenas that the country is having. So create it within the city of Kiryat Shmona. Allow the city people, which are sometimes not part of the pioneering spirit story of Israel, right? Because some of the people there were very poor when they came to Israel. Connect them to the kibbutznikim, which are the pioneering spirit, and create a blend which is just so interesting, together with Tel Chai College in the north, together with many international food companies like Nestle and Mars and Unilever, not out of pity, out of something that you're doing in the Galilee, that you can become the best in the country, create 30,000 jobs that are highly paid, and a new center of excellence for the country. That's our motto. This is what we do in Jerusalem. We did it in Beersheba. We're doing it in the Galilee. We're doing it in the city of Haifa, which also got beaten up with many young people left it. And we can do it in other regions as well. And so to the question of the individual, absolutely right. We need to create 250,000 jobs across the country, which are high-paying jobs in innovation areas, which Tel Aviv is not in the middle of. It's the only way to win.
And you know, you mentioned Haifa, so I want to talk more about. You know, I've got some interesting things I'd like to know about. You know, the stint you had in politics. But before we talk about that, you mentioned Haifa. You know, there was just a I would say demoralizing situation that occurred during the last Gaza war just now, which was the social unrest and discord between the Arabs and Jews inside Israel. And so how does that kind of action behavior, and let's say no one side was responsible for it inside Israel, how does that action and behavior influence your optimism about the opportunity to do things in a city like Haifa with its mixed community of Arabs and Jews? Do you still feel optimistic after the last few months?
Your question is spot on. You know, it made many of us challenged. We've seen some sites that we were terrified by, and we saw that there's so much tension below the surface that we it came out. But here's what we're doing in Haifa these days. You see the photo here. We're connecting between Philips and AstraZeneca and Intel and the Technion, and we have the biggest arena, the biggest fund and incubator for the Arab world, where the condition is to have Arab entrepreneurs lead it. And they work together with Jewish entrepreneurs. And because the city is a mixed city, we were taking the downtown district of the seaport, which in any other city in the world would be thriving. And the buildings there were neglected. And we're renovating building after building, bringing down the Technion faculties, the Haifa University faculties, Arabs, Jews. And to tell you that we felt personally offended by what happened in the streets right there, we did. But to tell you that we still got up on the next day and brought civil leaders, Jews and Arabs, to have an event. Penina is sitting here. Penina had one of the biggest events. Last week, we had the big event. Today, it's in the paper, all over the paper, a big event here in Jerusalem with Kalkalis, the leading economic publication in Israel, about bringing together Arabs and Jews. Last week, we had all these entrepreneurs from both sides here, and both the city of Jerusalem and the city of Haifa and the country of Israel is a country which will absolutely need to deal with communities which are not always immediate for many of the people. So even the ultra-Orthodox or the Arab community, which are now doctors and nurses in almost all the Israeli hospitals in a big way, these are the chances of bringing people together. Are we going to have setbacks? Absolutely. Do we need to get up the next morning and do it again? Yes.
I mean, that optimism is inspirational and refreshing. And I think, there's no doubt that you've been someone who's walked the talk of really trying to make a difference more broadly in society, as opposed to just, enriching people in and around the tech community. And you had a period of time, a few years in the early to mid 2010s, where you were a Labour Party Chaver Knesset, a member of Parliament. You had this great agenda, which was not altogether too dissimilar to exactly what you're talking about now with Beersheba and Kiryat Shmona, and specifically focused centers of excellence with specializations in cities. What was it like to do that within the confines of the political world versus the private world? What was easier? What was harder? How did you walk away feeling about the whole experience?
So I think that politics is one of these areas in Israel which are the last to change, right? So business change, innovation change, technology change, water, agriculture, a lot of these things are advancing in Israel. Politics is still challenged. Maybe now with some new people in government, no matter if they're the right or the left or the center, they're bringing some new optimism. So at the time, I had a rough time trying to bring my constructive agenda to the political front. When you criticize someone, they put all the spotlights on you. When you go against something, the media loves it. When you try to do something constructive, when you build something, when something takes a little time, it's a big challenge to take big constructive ideas and to make it a political agenda. Economic development may be a big political agenda in the US. In Israel, less so. Maybe today after COVID, there's a tune, people are listening to how do you rebuild some of the optimism, the cities, the economy, the small businesses, the Galilee, the Negev, the different things that people need to do. And to me, these 5 years were great on one hand, because I got to push big parts of the agenda. I created the cybersecurity task force. We now cooperate with about 20 other countries around the world, including Arab countries, around cybersecurity and cooperation. I was able to legislate 7 new regions of excellence. We got big budgets for Beersheba, big budgets for the Galilee, big budgets for some of the other regions, but not all of it translated into political clout in real time. And I think if you learn something, is that the political tune need to be iconic. They need to be short. They need to be strong. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that, and it gives me much better capabilities to do the big things I'm doing now, because a lot of the ministers, we trust each other. We know what's real. And when you build something, it takes years to show it. You can't show it immediately. All these jobs in Beersheba, all these jobs in the Galilee, in Haifa, in Jerusalem. It took a few years to do all that. It doesn't happen just like that when you make a declaration on TV.
And the current Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, also is a tech entrepreneur originally and had pretty substantial success. And let's say, perhaps in the unlikely event he takes a very large step across the political divide and gives you a phone call. I don't know if you've got a relationship with him. I imagine you have some relationship, but he rings you up and he's confused and he says, Erel, what do you think are the two most important things for this government to do in the next 6 to 12 months? I mean, I'm sure you've got views on that. Do you want to share your views and tell us what you think is important right now?
Well, first of all, I wish him a lot of luck, and I think I think he doesn't come from my political background, but I think it's great that a new prime minister that comes from the technology arena is now in on the front line. And I have great relationships both with him and Ayelet Shaked and people on the right, on the left. And my message to them is that, look, Israel needs a new chapter. You guys are a new chapter, right? You have a government that's from the right, from the left, from the center. And what we need after COVID is to rebuild with a vision that gives a lot of the young people a chance to succeed, to make a living, to start things, and a lot of regions in the country a chance. So the 7 new regions of excellence in the Galilee, in Haifa, and Beersheba, that is something I'm putting back on their desk. I'm getting people to come and see it here, people that I expect him to be personally in the inauguration of our new center in the north in Kiryat Shmona. And sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. If he stands on stage and next to him someone from Labor and Meretz and from the Arab Party, and we talk about the Galilee as the next frontier of things that we're building, of budgets that we're giving, of young people that we're giving a chance, that gives a new chapter to our state in a way that demonstrates and says, show, don't tell. Show me. And that's exactly the kind of things that we can show. And we can come together, right and left and center, in order to build things together. And when we build things, we unite. Sure, we still are going to have a big debate about how we see an agreement in the region, both with the Palestinians, with the other Arab countries. That's not going to be an easy debate to have. But let's have it not out of cynicism, out of building things together that we can agree on, and then we can debate on how the future needs to look like in an honest and open way.
And so in the 5 or 6 minutes we've got left, I want to kind of broaden out even further and say, not only have you had an impact, a positive impact in Jerusalem and in Israel through social enterprise, through business, politics, but I know you're involved as well in the Emirates and engaging with the Emirates. And that's fantastic. And, this is a new opportunity for the country, the Abraham Accords. The question I'm going to ask is different to the one you think I might ask, which is, do you think that an agreement with the Palestinians is fundamentally important to being able to maximize the value of these Abraham Accords?
Well, let's look at where we're going, broadly speaking, in the region, and then let's come to the Palestinians later, because everybody puts them first. Israel needs to be part of an alliance in the Mediterranean Middle East region, where it works together with moderate Arab states against the extremists. We have extremists in our region. Our region, we don't have Canada as our neighbor, right? So like in South Park, remember they always draw the Canadians funny? We have some very harsh neighbors. Iran right now is a very aggressive military state. ISIS, this is the visit that we had to, to the UAE. We'll talk about it in a second. ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah. The fact that we want to cooperate with the moderate states doesn't mean that we don't understand that there's some pretty difficult extreme forces we need to fight against, but we don't have to fight alone. We can stand together in a security alliance with the UAE, with the Saudis, with Egypt, with Jordan, with Morocco, with Tunisia, with different countries here in the region, both on security, but also on economic development. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, you'll have extreme forces that are going after each one of these countries individually and against some of the other countries as a group. But if you create an alliance, Israel doesn't have to stand alone. And when we travel in the UAE, we're building, we're building two major projects. One is a cyber security fintech innovation hub, and the other is a food tech innovation hub as well. And what we're doing is we're saying 10 cities, 10 ideas, 10 projects that could change the way you think about the region. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Riyadh, Casablanca, Tunisia, Cairo, Amman. All these cities could work together on water, on agriculture, on food, on healthcare, on economic development. And who do we have against us? Yes, we have countries that are very harshly against us. Now that we understand the larger framework, what do we do about the Palestinians, right? That's the question. But that's how I want to address the question, not the Palestinians first. If I have the larger framework, I need to understand that in the longer term, the Palestinians could be our allies in this regional initiative. Now, what do we have to solve? We have to solve a territorial dispute between us and the West Bank. There's no dispute with Gaza. Gaza is the place where we have the most missiles, but there's no dispute. Israel already withdrew from Gaza, right? So you have Hamas, and Hamas you need to battle. You can work with the Palestinian Authority, but Hamas, you cannot compromise. Besides a ceasefire, you cannot compromise, because whatever you do, you need to understand that they will be harshly against you. But in the same vein, the Palestinian Authority is willing to work with you. Now, do we agree on everything? Do we agree on the borders in the West Bank and Jerusalem? No, we don't. But we are cooperating constructively on a security level. We are cooperating on economic development level, and we can come to the next level, including having a debate between the right and the left in Israel with something that is not only what we have to give up, but what we can gain from a regional agreement that includes the Palestinians. Is it easy? No, it's not. If it was easy, you'd be in another country.
It would be done if it was easy. It would be done. We wouldn't be talking about it.
Years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're just about out of time. I mean, that has been fascinating. It's been inspirational. I would say that you're a big capitalist with a big heart, and definitely a man of hope. And I think that Israel, and in particular now, needs that optimism and that hope with the new leaf that's been turned over in the country. And I think everyone on here has found that very inspirational. So I'm going to hand back to Bren, and I'm going to thank you, Erel. That was really a wonderful hour with you.
Thank you, Adir, for your generosity of spirit and for allowing me and my colleagues to say what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve still.
Thank you, Erel, and thank you, Adir. Look, we are all the product of our drive, our intelligence, and our experience. And I think the last hour has proven that Erel has plenty of all three. From his kibbutz childhood, his years in America, his time with visionaries like Teddy Cohen, and of course his transformative efforts in facilitating startup companies, but also startup mindsets right across the country and indeed across the region. I think this has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm so pleased that you all were able to hear direct from Erel. We'll be putting this conversation on our YouTube channel, where it will sit alongside the dozens of conversations we've had with highly influential Israelis just like Erel. Subscribe to our channel and you won't miss another conversation. We are also in the process of organizing another ZFA conversation, and we'll send you the details once it's all locked in. Until then, and until we join each other online again, please take care and we'll see you soon. Good night.
Thank you so much, Bren. Thank you, Adir, and we'll see you soon. Hopefully in Australia.
Wonderful. Hopefully in Israel.
In Israel. That's
Good night.